I get the best view here to see your family, see Liz, and had a grandbaby there for a while, but as a new grandfather like you of six, I understand sometimes you have to step out with those busy moms and dads. But I did get a picture of that with your grandbaby there. I sent it to you as well, so you'll have that as a memory from today. But it's great to have you here. I mean, your track record's amazing as an innovator, a scientist, a mechanical engineer, electrical engineer. I'm a chemical engineer, so we could geek out here for a moment, but I just appreciate your thoughtfulness, looking at trade-offs in this, complex areas that relates to energy and being thoughtful and intentional going forward here with getting the right policies for our country. So thank you for stepping into the public service world. It's a sacrifice for you and your sweet family, and I want to thank you both for doing that. As I step back and look at the numbers at 30,000-foot view, think we're going to need 50% more energy in the next 25 years than we currently consume today globally. This has got to be a discussion increasingly on how do we get more energy, not less, as we think about these trade-offs. I think you play a really critical role here when confirmed as our Secretary of Energy. The last 4 years I've seen, I think, taking some steps backward, unfortunately. We saw pauses on LNG exports, prohibiting new coal leasing in eastern Montana, putting a pause overall on oil and gas development, even trying to ban new gas appliances. I think that's out of touch where the reality is, and that's why I appreciate, I think, your pragmatism as you look at where truth is, where physics are, and what the demand is going forward. One of the first things you can do as secretary, I think, is to refocus the department on pro-baseload energy policies. Baseload power resources like coal, natural gas, hydropower, nuclear, I think will ensure that we have access to reliable and affordable energy year-round, whether it rains or snows or the sun's shining or not. The world needs more energy, not less. And with the proliferation of data centers, thinking about, how does Google and Microsoft and others think about it right now? They're buying baseload power. They need to think about baseload power as a way here to fund what they need to do here as it relates to the revolution going on in AI, blockchain technologies, quantum computing. The load is, I think the 50% forecast of more is probably low in where this is probably actually going to land here, and you can help us get ahead of that curve. So here's my question, Mr. Secretary, to be. Will you promote policies both at DOE and throughout the government that will expand energy development and ensure that reliable and affordable baseload sources of power are protected?
Absolutely, Senator. If I get the honor and the privilege to be confirmed and to serve, top goal of mine, you just summarized the top goal. Our electricity grid, as I've said earlier in the testimony today, it's become more expensive and less reliable, reversing a 100-year trend where that was becoming cheaper in inflation-adjusted cost and more reliable, and we've gone the other direction. We cannot go that direction. That's not good for America. It's not good for our industries. And that is a top priority of mine to work on.
I think we violently agree that reducing emissions is better through innovation, not regulation. What are some ways you think about how innovation could help drive reduction in emissions?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the track record right now, almost all of the emission reductions in our country and across the globe, almost all of them have come from innovations. In the United States, the biggest one by far has been the arrival of low-cost natural gas through the shale revolution. That was innovation. It was not imposed. We got low-cost gas, lower emission gas, not just lower greenhouse gas emissions, but lower pollutants, lower particulate matter, lower SOx, lower NOx. That helps air quality. Countries that have reduced, a lot of country emission reductions that have been from regulation and from top-down mandates have actually not been the emissions reductions they appear to be. They've more been an emissions removal. If you shut down industry in your country or in your state, the emissions from that industry don't go away. They just go somewhere else. And if they go out of the United States with the cleanest and most advanced manufacturing technology, those emissions just go up. So really the only pathway to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and lift up people's quality of life is through energy innovation. And America's been a hotbed of that, and we need to return a vigor and a focus on innovation, on energy, right here in this country.
All right, I'm out of time. One final quick sentence and statement is, as you know, Montana is becoming a quantum powerhouse. In places like Bozeman in my hometown are leading some of this high-tech innovation. We've got the Quantum Leadership Act that we're working on to spur more jobs and research in this area. My question is, when confirmed, will you work with me to bolster quantum and other next-gen technologies?
Not only I will, more importantly, this administration will. This administration and President-elect Trump is passionate about leading the next generation industries and leading them here in America. Absolutely.
Great. Thank you.
Love your passion.
Thank you.
Yeah, he went while I was out. Okay, we'll turn next to another new member of our committee, the great senator from the great state of Arkansas, Senator Cotton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Percent, good to have you here this morning. I think we're seeing here in this committee is we really do have a divide between two very different philosophies about how to go forward and what's best for the American people in this economy and what's best for global competitiveness. I remember sitting right in this chamber as we were debating whether or not we should launch the multiple trillion-dollar massive spending bills, which is a $2 trillion COVID bill, the Inflation Reduction Act, massive multi-trillion-dollar bills that even Democrat former secretaries of Treasury said could be inflationary, and indeed it was. You compare that outcome to what we are going to return back to the policies of the prior Trump administration, that when you lower taxes for businesses and the American people, you create more tax revenue, you create more economic activity, you create more wage growth, particularly for minorities as well. And you start to get back into winning in terms of global competitiveness. We stopped the inversions. It was absolutely like, boom, went from multiple inversion to zero once we move forward with this. And I couldn't be prouder of what we did boldly back during the Trump administration. We tried to fight against during this administration, these massive out-of-control spending bills that were inflationary, and the American people suffered greatly with these high levels of inflation, higher mortgage rates, and so forth. And so I'm glad to have you as our next Secretary of Treasury work with you to restore sanity back to where we were under President Trump. So congratulations on your nomination and your willingness to serve. With the expiration coming of these tax rates, we're facing a $4.3 trillion tax increase if we don't act this year. As we begin drafting this bill, and I applaud Chairman Crapo, he brought us together as ranking member last year prior to getting the majority back, anticipating we might have this moment. And we started talking about what are some key themes. Then we got into the details over several months of working groups for this next tax bill to renew and preserve the tax rates and prevent a $4 trillion tax increase. One of the key words was permanency. Permanency. I've expressed my support for the use of current policy baseline. I've expressed my support for permanency because we add uncertainty here in Congress with expiring tax code provisions. It's time to make them permanent, to take one additional burden away from the American people wondering what's going to happen with Congress, whether my tax rates will depend on what happens in the next election or what happens if Congress can act. Let's take that off the table with permanency. My question, Mr. Percent, is you've said we need to grow our way out of our current economic situation. I couldn't agree more. And that's just the philosophical divide we face here. Somebody who embraces more the supply side idea, reduce rates, unleash capital into the free markets and let those markets decide where that investment relies versus a bunch of bureaucrats here in Washington with wasteful spending. How does permanency and certainty of the tax code affect our ability to grow out of these problems?
Senator Daines, I've enjoyed getting to know you over the past year with your work on the National Republican Senate Committee and talking to you in your office, and also discussing your history in the private sector, both with the big company and small companies. And a question like that makes it clear to me that you understand the incentives that it is incentives that drive everything in tax policy. And I can tell you that since November 5th, for small businesses, we have seen the biggest increase in optimism since they have been keeping the metrics. So certainty, small business owners, many of whom they are pass-through corporations, believe that we will get the tax TCJA across the line. I think we could see a bigger increase in optimism. In economics, when we have something we can't define, we call it animal spirits. And I think we are seeing animal spirits, a nascent move up, but permanency and forward guidance gives people certainty. We get capital investment, we get hiring, we get real wages. Employers want to keep train and expand their workforce. So everyone wins with permanency, certainty. A kind of forward guidance for tax policy, I think, would be one of the things that could unleash this new golden age that President Trump has talked about.
Yeah, I want to make one statement. I know I'm out of time here, Mr. Chairman, but when you take a look at the private sector jobs in America, it's about 140 million private sector jobs. 88 million of those jobs are from pass-through entities. That's about 63%, which tells me that, and that's the part that's expiring. I mean, the corporate rates are staying permanent. It's the pass-through rates, those 88 million jobs, 63% of the private sector jobs are taking a look at what's going to happen here in Washington over the course of the next 6 to 8 months. Very, very important we make these rates permanent and prevent a tsunami of $4.3 trillion tax increase that will come if we don't act. Thank you, Mr. Pacent.
Thank you, Senator Cortez Masto.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bassett, good to see you. Thank you for meeting with me. Welcome to your family as well. Let me ask you this. I'm going to talk a little bit about the ACA premium tax credits. Over 80,000 of my constituents in Nevada receive that premium tax credit to assist them in.
Well, I guess at that point, then, we will move on to Senator Daines.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Kennedy, I'm glad to see you here this morning. I listened to your opening remarks, and you mentioned that you want to make HHS the gold standard of science. I have found my engagements with you, both behind closed doors in my office, as well as listening to you publicly, to be very thoughtful and science-based. I applaud that. I thank you for that. And I realize this will likely be a very partisan vote on this committee and on the Senate floor. But let the record state there are 3 medical doctors on this side of the dais. I'm a chemical engineer. We believe in science. I'm thankful that you do too, and you made that comment in your opening remarks. I want to talk about agriculture for a moment. We talked about our common love for Montana. You've been to Montana many times. It's a wonderful state. A lot of folks have discovered it. They watch the show Yellowstone, and people are coming and moving into our state. But it's an amazing place. But as you know, agriculture is our top economic driver in Montana. We produce some of the highest quality crops, the best livestock in the country and the world. Our farmers and our ranchers are truly some of the most effective environmental stewards in ensuring we have a safe food supply chain in the world. I share your view that protecting the integrity and safety of our food supply is of utmost importance. I appreciate the research happening in places like Montana State University to help farmers produce resilient, healthy, and safe crops, as well as their agricultural practices. You mentioned you were a 4-H kid growing up. I think our 4-H kids and our FFA kids are some of the best kids in America. My question for you, Mr. Kennedy, is if confirmed, as I'm listening to my farmers and ranchers talk about the future, will you commit to working collaboratively with partners at USDA, at the relevant federal agencies, as well as our Montana farmers and ranchers before implementing any policy that might affect or impact food supply?
Absolutely will make that commitment. I have, as I shared with you, a personal commitment and a long career working with farmers. I want to make sure I understand the very, very narrow margins, the slim margins that American farmers and ranchers are dealing with. And I don't want, under my watch, a single farmer to have to leave his farm for economic reasons or for regulatory or bureaucratic reasons while I serve, if I'm privileged to serve, to be confirmed as HHS Secretary. Even more important, President Trump has a very, very strong commitment to farmers. President Trump is probably historically in modern history the best farm president in our history. Farm income spiked for the first time in decades under his last administration. He got solid support from farmers across the country. Farm country is Trump country. Farmers across the country supported him during this election. He has specifically instructed me that he wants farmers involved in every policy, and that he wants me to work with Brooke Rollins at USDA to make sure that we preserve American farmers, that all of our policies support them.
Mr. Kennedy, thank you. And if confirmed, I look forward to having you and Brooke Rollins out to Montana to spend some time with
you. You have
farmers.
my commitment to come there anytime, particularly during ski season or hunting season.
Deal. I want to shift gears for a moment. As we discussed in the meeting we had in my office, mifepristone was approved in 2000. The FDA has been under scrutiny and brought to court for failure to properly assess this drug, as well as subsequent deregulations Senator Langford described that have occurred over the past 25 years. Some of these deregulations included ending the requirement that these drugs be prescribed by a doctor, ending reporting requirements for adverse events, and allowing these pills to be obtained through the mail. In fact, the FDA's own prescribing label mentioned that 3 to 5% of women taking this drug end up in the emergency room. My question is, if confirmed as Secretary of HHS, will you commit to working with the FDA Commissioner to review these deregulatory actions that are threatening the safety of women?
Sorry, Senator. As I said to Senator Langford, I think it's immoral to have a policy where patients are not allowed to report adverse events and where doctors are discouraged from doing that. President Trump has asked me to study the safety of mifepristone. He has not yet taken a stand on how to regulate it. Whatever he does, I will implement those policies, and I will work with this committee to make those policies make sense.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy.
Senator Hassan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Ranking Member Wyden, and welcome, Mr. Kennedy, and to your family as well.
Senator Daines.
Chairman, thank you. Mr. Greer, it's good to see you here again. Thank you for your commitment to service. You've seen really the history of your life as one of serving our country. I'm grateful to you and your family in that regard. President Trump has certainly laid out an ambitious trade agenda. He's taken serious action this week to secure American interests. I share his view that the United States should use every tool at our disposal to secure our borders, to stop the flow of dangerous drugs into our communities, and to open new markets around the globe. I applaud the quick work done by President Trump to ensure that Mexico and Canada are doing their part. It's important to note that previous blanket tariff policies for steel and for aluminum had serious effects on a wide range of my constituents in Montana. Agriculture is our #1 economic driver in Montana. In some cases, the price of aluminum in the United States rose 15%, which increased costs of our manufacturers and was ultimately passed on to consumers like farmers buying heavy equipment. It's equally important that we protect American farmers, American ranchers, small businesses, manufacturers by moving quickly to open up new markets in the face of retaliation. The threat of retaliatory tariffs on Montana commodities like wheat, barley, beet sugar, pulse crops still looms as negotiations continue with Canada and Mexico. As I chat with my farmers back home, input costs remain very high. Farmers and ranchers are facing razor-thin margins, in many cases now negative margins, and the future cost of important inputs like fertilizer as well as energy remains uncertain. Mr. Greer, if confirmed, will you prioritize swift and immediate action to secure new market access for Montana producers who are now facing the threats of retaliatory tariffs?
Senator, thank you for that. And I know that these issues are front and center for you and your constituents in Montana, and they're things that I pay very close attention to as well. With respect to whether there will be swift action, I think it is safe to say that the president has a bias for action. and I am going to do my best to keep up with him so I can open up the markets, so I can report back to him, if I'm confirmed, I'm able to do this, that we're opening markets, we're giving Montana cattle ranchers and other farmers and growers opportunities in a lot of markets to expand their market access, to give them better growth from year to year. I know these are razor-thin margins. I know every year the farmers and ranchers have to think about how they're going to make their money that year, given the input costs, et cetera. And swift action is certainly what you will get from me if I'm confirmed.
Thank you. It's not lost on us that 95% of the world's consumers live outside the United States. There's a lot of mouths to feed outside the United States, and great opportunities. We think about the future of farm and ranch in Montana. A lot of that will depend on access to the 95% of consumers who live outside the United States. The Biden administration, sadly, and I remember having these confirmation hearings with the former USTR, they pursued a very unambitious trade agenda that created a vacuum that allowed countries to fill the void left because of our absence. Well, they were asleep at the wheel. Other countries were negotiating trade agreements that resulted in America falling behind. From beef exports to China, wheat to Japan, pulse crops to India, Montana ag has benefited greatly from some of these trade agreements in the Pacific. I remember being in China working with the Chinese leadership to remove a 14-year ban on U.S. beef imports. It's now one of the largest beef markets in the world. We must not forget, despite all the challenges we face with China today, that it is the second largest consumer market in the world. There's a lot of opportunity for growth for our ag producers to get access to that important market. We must continue to engage our farmers and ranchers on equal footing with the rest of the world. My final question, Mr. Greer, how will you ensure that China honors its commitments from that phase one trade deal? In fact, Senator Perdue then and myself went to Beijing, sat across the table from Liu He back in late 2019 to complete that phase one deal for President Trump. But how do we make sure those commitments made in that phase one deal for U.S. ag products increase access to that important market, and again, ensure that our producers are on a level playing field?
So, Senator, in the president's trade policy memorandum that he issued 2 weeks ago, he directed the United States Trade Representative to review China's compliance or noncompliance with the phase one trade agreement. There are mechanisms within that agreement, dispute settlement mechanisms, bilateral between the United States and China, to address failures of compliance. So if I were confirmed, I would expect to very quickly assess the results of that compliance review and very quickly go about enforcing compliance. I think it is of critical importance that if China wants to trade with the United States and have a healthy economic relationship, if that's possible, if that's possible, that a lot of it is going to be premised on fair market access for our exporters and producers.
Well, final statement, Mr. Chairman, I'm over, but just one final statement. If confirmed, Mr. Greer, I think we will have a very good team in working with you, if confirmed, Senator Perdue, soon to be Ambassador David Perdue to China, working together here in making some tremendous progress and getting access to that very important, very large market for producers. Thank you. I very much enjoy meeting with you, Dr. Oz, and having a really great discussion, talking about the innovation and the experience you bring to this job is almost unprecedented. You're exactly the right person at the right time to take over this, this huge responsibility. I want to talk for a minute about Hyde. As you know, President Biden took several actions during his term to expand abortion access and travel for abortion using taxpayer dollars in many ways, including through the Medicaid program, which is explicitly in violation of the Hyde Amendment. Let me say it even more clearly. It's in violation of the law. If you're confirmed, will you commit to upholding the Hyde Amendment in ensuring that our federal health care programs are not providing abortions on the taxpayer's dime?
Senator Daines, I appreciate very much taking time with me. You're another original Maho person because you're able to haul that elk, I don't know how far, in the backlands of Montana. The answer is very simple, yes. The Hyde Amendment has been around for a long time, and CMS should obey the rule and fund accordingly.
Thanks, Dr. Oz. I want to talk about Medicare coverage for new technologies and innovation. During President Trump's first term, he spearheaded efforts to ensure that seniors could have access to innovative medical devices through the Medicare program. The Biden administration repealed these efforts and replaced them with the TSAT rule, which provided a pathway to expedited coverage for a limited number of innovative medical devices. However, the rule requires new clinical evidence for eligible devices, which can be duplicative for innovative technologies that have invested in robust clinical trials. The question is, would you consider addressing this limitation that the Biden administration placed, or create a coverage pathway for innovative devices with existing strong clinical data?
Senator, yes. I think we lose a major opportunity when we create ambiguity in how devices are not just created safely, but also marketed wisely. And so the gap between when the FDA says this is a good product that can save lives and when the American people, beneficiaries of Medicare or Medicaid programs within the states, are able to access those. And I'll use the Mitra clip as an example. The Mitra clip, just as a reminder, was the device, I wrote a patent on it early on, but it's a device that was created with smart engineers and eventually received CE mark, which is European approval for sales in 2008. It took 5 more years for the US FDA to approve the device. That would save lives, it turns out, with clinical trials proving this, and save money at the same time. But despite that fact, it took another 7 or 8 years for CMS to fund patients getting this device if they're dying in heart failure with a leaky valve. So we wasted a lot of money. We maybe lost some lives because of it, and all because we had a regulatory apparatus that was not transparent. I believe we can do better. And to your point, we should make it easier for industry to create life-saving tools by aligning when the FDA approves a product with when CMS begins to fund it for beneficiaries, because that's our job, to provide the best quality care to the American people who are on Medicare, Medicaid chip, and even the exchanges, and these tools should be used.
Appreciate your expertise in the area, Dr. Oz. I want to shift gears here and talk about Montana rural health. And yes, I did pack that elk out, and yes, that is a workout to pack an elk out when you quarter it and walk miles back to the pickup. I believe rural health is a key component of America's healthcare conversation. It's really important in my frontier home state of Montana. It's distance, it's weather, workforce shortages, service line erosions are just a few of the difficulties we face in Montana as they try to access health care. Given the challenges of rural health care, how could CMS support the expansion of telehealth services? And I recognize telehealth is not is not just one silver bullet, but it's an important tool in the overall tool chest to help us provide better access. What are your thoughts on ways we could ensure that healthcare can be more accessible to these rural populations?
Well, as you know, this House has Congress has a responsibility to extend telehealth widely throughout the nation, as it was during COVID. I think part of the opportunity for telehealth is to link it to large institutions in those areas. So an institution, a big one, let's say in Salt Lake City, might be able to be a telehealth partner to a rural health clinic in Montana. So it's not just that they pick up the phone when you call. It's not someone in another country far away that's answering the cry for help. It's someone from an institution that knows your protocols. Maybe they've shared theirs. You have a simpatico, a relationship that goes beyond just what's on the streamed-in signal. And that is how we'll build telemedicine, telepsychiatry, which is for mental health services, vital in places like Montana, especially where we have many people who are suffering from undiagnosed mental health illnesses, and there's no place to go in a consistent fashion to get those therapies. It is a major focus of mine, and if confirmed, it's one of the areas I think we'll be able to make major inroads because there are no opponents to this.
Yeah. Dr. Ross, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Johnson.
Hey, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Daines.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Congratulations on your nomination, your willingness to serve. Since the Social Security Administration was first established as an independent agency, the importance of the public trust has always been integral to that core mission. I want to cut to the chase, though, on customer service for a moment, if I might. Like Senator Johnson, I spent most of my career in the private sector. Customer service is paramount. In fact, after I left Procter & Gamble, I went to work for a customer experience CRM solution. We worked with call centers to make sure the customer was getting a great experience. And so as we prepared for this hearing yesterday, I asked my team, let's just see what it's like to call the Social Security Administration. So we went online, and there's a nice little box that says, we are here to help. Now, I realize you're going to be coming in here to fix some of the problems. This is not happening on your watch, but I want to make you aware of the customer experience my staff member experienced when they called the 800 number, we are here to help. So to recant what happened here, first of all, they were disconnected twice when they got on the phone. In fact, I'm going to read the, I just want to get the text message. Here it is. Called the SSA number 3 times. Disconnected twice after 2 minutes. And this is the published We Are Here to Help 800 number. Finally got through to wait to speak to a representative. And here's what my staff member encountered for an hour. I mean, they could have at least had Olivia Newton-John or some mediocre 70s music. But for an hour, this repeated over and over again, and then they were disconnected. You can't make this up. I'd encourage anybody, try calling the Social Security 1-800 number. It's 1-800-772-1213. And in fact, it says if you call in the morning, the wait times are usually shorter. Later in the week, a little longer. Later in the month, maybe a little longer. It says our automated telephone services are available 24 hours a day. Disconnected 3 times. And the 3rd time after waiting an hour listening to these really D-grade elevator music. So we've got a lot of work to do to serve the taxpayers in this country and improve their customer experience. I just want to have some help. And I realize this isn't happening on your watch, but let me just put like one of your to-dos is maybe you try calling the 1-800 number and see what it's like from your own experience. This was just literally yesterday. As you begin looking at areas for innovation and improvements in the delivery of the vital services and benefits, will you commit to me and to my office to ensure that Montanans have access to Social Security, particularly for our Montanans who live in rural areas?
You know, my belief is, first of all, thank you for talking about the phone service. Because although we publish a 22-minute wait time, that's an average wait time. And I think the better way to measure it over the long haul is what percent of calls get answered within 30 seconds, right? Because we have percents of calls that are taking an hour and a half, and only half the callers get through. So I bring that up because I have a multi-channel strategy I think about, which is to meet beneficiaries where they want to be. If they want to come to a field office, if they want to do it over the phone, or if they want to do it over the web. But all three of those channels have to execute well. They have to execute well. So it's not enough to just have them. We have to be able to also use all the technology available to us today to do a great job for our beneficiaries. So we have my commitment to work my tail off on all of it.
Thank you. You know, one of the challenges we face oftentimes in the post-customer service hours, particularly with call centers, is the call centers are open when many people are not available because they're at work. And then when they are available, the call center's closed. And so we just described there the multi-channel type approach, whether it's a web experience, getting information directly from the internet, whether it's a call, whether it's an email, to really lock in on service levels that we can make sure we're providing to our customers, the taxpayers of this country, and those beneficiaries have been paying into that system their entire life. They deserve a lot better. And I hope you will bring much needed change to the Social Security Administration with your leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chairman.
Senator Daines.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Ambassador Greer, welcome to Capitol Hill. I share the President's determination to end these unfair trade practices, whether they are tariffs or non-tariff barriers. I hope we can avoid an all-out trade war. A trade war will mean higher prices for the American consumer because I think we could do a little thought exercise at the moment. Who pays these high tariffs? In the short, medium term, it will be the consumer. It will be the consumer. And so I'm worried about the inflationary effect. I'm worried if there is a trade war that we're going to have markets shutting down for American farmers, ranchers, and manufacturers. I'll give you an example of that here in a moment. But I'm encouraged because the President's announcement has gotten the attention of a lot of countries. I was encouraged to see Kevin Hassett this morning talking about negotiation occurring, looking at President Trump's latest posts on Truth Social, the fact that we've got Koreans now coming to the United States, literally dispatched to engage with us to lower these barriers, tariff and non-tariff, the Japanese, and some 70 countries now that want to come and work and address the issues of the barriers for American companies, American producers doing businesses in their countries with 95% of the world's consumers outside the United States. Critically important. So this is very encouraging. I think that's in part why we're seeing the rebound today in the equity markets, because there's hope that these tariffs are a means and not solely an end. And if that's the case, I think we're on a really good path with this kind of tough position we're taking to actually solve some of these problems in barriers in trade that have been lingering for decades. And President Trump is taking bold leadership to address it, and I'm hoping for a good outcome. My hope is this is a sign of things to come, that these countries will offer major concessions and make historic trade deals with President Trump. Ambassador Greer, I encourage the administration, encourage you to use this opportunity to secure better terms with our partners, with our allies, to protect and grow American jobs, to grow access for our American farmers, our ranchers, our manufacturers, and American families. 3 weeks ago, I was in Hanoi and met with General Party Secretary Do Lam, the highest ranking official in Vietnam. And then I went to Beijing and met with high-ranking Chinese officials, including the Premier Li Qiang. I carried President Trump's America First message directly to these leaders. I spoke with Premier Li Qiang and demanded that China stop the flow of the fentanyl precursors into Mexico, the United States, and Canada. I raised concerns about developments related to the expiration of registrations for beef processing plants here in the United States and some non-science-based barriers which has impacted Montana and U.S. beef exports. I want to remind you that in 2017, I went to China. I carried some steaks from a Montana rancher, Fred Wacker of Miles City, Montana. We met with the premier. In fact, I had one of your predecessors, Rob Portman, then the senator from Ohio and a former USTR with me. I had Senator Barrasso with me, Senator Kennedy with me. And as a result of that meeting, 30 days later, they lifted a 14-year ban on U.S. beef imports into China. Let me talk about what that has meant so far. This is the largest beef export market in the world is now China. For U.S. producers of beef, in 2021, we shipped $1.6 billion of beef. Keep in mind, the 2017 number was $31 million. It was $2.1 billion in 22, $1.6 billion in 23, $1.6 billion in 24. But here's the concern. That's been shut off now in the last 3 weeks. March exports of beef to China, U.S. beef, declined 92%. So the valve is shut right now for U.S. beef producers. My question is, what can we do to hold China's commitment to U.S. beef and other ag imports, which are so critical right now for U.S. producers?
Thank you, Senator, and you've always been a leader on this, and I appreciate that. China, of course, needs to take down their barriers. It's been a persistent challenge with them, and they like to use economic coercion, and they have their own method of doing things. But my hope would be is that they turn back on this course of action. I think President Trump is focused on making sure we have the right program in place, that we're dealing with partners who are going to be respectful and achieve reciprocity with us. And I think a lot of this is going to be up to the Chinese on how forward-leaning they want to be on having fair trade with us. I'm very sensitive to this issue in particular, and I want to make sure we open up beef markets other places too, so we don't have to be dependent on just one market.
Yeah. Well, Ambassador Greer, I'm encouraged by the negotiations that are going on as we speak with Japan, with Korea, with some 70 countries who want to now reduce their tariff and non-tariff barriers. This could be absolutely a monumental moment in trade for the United States, and Godspeed.
Thank my colleague. Next is Senator Young.
Good to have you here, Ambassador Greer. And let me just begin by commending you. You've been very accessible as we've tried to get some clarity on exactly trade policy and where we're headed and how we expect counterparties to move and all the rest. You returned my phone call immediately, and your team's been in touch with mine. And so just that speaks very well of you and the Trump.
Senator Daines.
Congressman Long, good to see you here today. I have great memories of the time that we served together in the U.S. House. Very proud to see you here today as our next Commissioner of the IRS. Congratulations on your nomination.
Thank you.
And your continued commitment to public service. Well, it goes without saying the role of the IRS Commissioner is very important. While nobody wants to pay taxes, when they do, they want to have the experience as seamless a process as possible. At the very least, they expect to avoid political games. Unfortunately, during the Biden administration, the IRS suffered a massive leak of confidential taxpayer information. A politically motivated contractor managed to disclose thousands of returns without authorization. The same administration allowed unannounced home visits under false pretenses and raids on small businesses to collect non-financial documents, including my state of Montana. This is why last Congress I introduced legislation to increase penalties for individuals who unlawfully disclose taxpayer information. We need to make sure that people are held accountable for breaking the law, but it's more important to avoid these disclosures in the first place. Congressman Long, if confirmed, do you commit to protecting sensitive taxpayer information?
Yes.
You know, Montanans rely on IRS field offices when they encounter an issue and they need quick answers. We had some experiences here, in fact, in this committee, where I had my staff call into the IRS helpline. And, you know, at least you'd expect maybe some bad 70s music for the hold music. It wasn't even bad 70s music. It was worse. And they were on hold for nearly an hour, listening to some really bad elevator music, only then to be disconnected. My staff works closely with the field offices to get timely and substantive answers to difficult questions and situations. It's important these offices run as smoothly as possible and provide the level of service that taxpayers pay for and deserve. Congressman Long, if confirmed, how will you strengthen the workforce at the IRS to provide strong customer service?
I earlier had mentioned that, and I don't know anybody else that would do this or even think of it, but I have pledged to arrive 90 minutes before the office opens here and in Montana. You may not see me much in D.C. if I am confirmed, because I'm going to be traveling all around the country to these different offices and building a culture that people want, instead of looking at their watch and saying, I've got 3 years, 4 days, and 12 minutes before I retire. I got to get out of this place. I hate it. I want them to be anxious to come into work in the morning. I want to build the culture and help my employee partners to where they're like, nobody ever asked our opinion on anything, ever. In 27 years I've been here, in 7 years and 7 months, I've never been invited up to the third floor where the commissioner is. Mm-hmm. And the taxpayers need the same level of service. And if you get this group happy and this group happy where they're not afraid of each other, I don't want either side to be intimidated in that equation. And I think that that's how you improve service at the IRS. And this thing about calls, I talked earlier, there was a 2.5 hour, just 4 or 5 days ago, a guy contacted me, waited 2.5 hours on the phone. And when he got put through, the lady, after 12 minutes, she said, I don't have time for this. I don't have time for you. He gave me her name and her badge and there. I haven't done anything with it, but, you know, I'm not over there. But it's stinking thinking. I mean, everyone I've run into in D.C. at Treasury or OPM or wherever has been very, very pleasant. And they all speak and they seem to be happy with what they do. I know there's some have taken the early out or whatever, but I think that if they know somebody's at the helm at the IRS that cares about them and cares about their life and wants their opinion, I think a light bulb will turn on and we can get it from the cellar up to the second or third floor as far as what they're, if they feel better about themselves and about their job, you don't think they're going to treat people better on the outside. And I may be tilting at windmills, but I really think that that's what it takes is a new culture, a new attitude. And like Charles Rossetti, buy some rubber stoppers for the door and keep your door open where people can have access to see who's in there.
Congressman, thank you. It'll be a refreshing change. My grandmother had to pick up a job because my grandpa didn't make much of a living, and later on in life she went to work for the IRS and was a dedicated federal employee for many, many years. And she woke up every day. She got in there early, went home late. My grandma always told me, you know, count your blessings. She was a positive person, and I'm sure she was a great, passionate service agent for taxpayers. And so my point is that I think you were going to, I'll be honest something here. There's a lot of dedicated federal employees that want to do the right thing, and they show up every day. They're grateful for the work. They just need a leader here that respects them and empowers them. As you said, takes it out of the basement here and brings them up and treats them as peers versus second-class citizens. And that kind of leadership is needed, and I'm confident you'll deliver that.
My dad never had a bad day. I mean, he was the most, I was telling Senator Wyden the other day that he got drafted for the BAA, the Basketball Association of America, to play as Senator Wyden. That was his lifelong dream to play professionally. He had some health things that didn't allow him to do that. But Dad was always positive, always upbeat, never had a bad day, just like your grandmother. And people, if you treat them, I like people. I like the left side. I like the right side. If people will give me a chance to show what I can do, I think we can do some very successful things at the IRS.
Senator Warnock.
Chance.
All right.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Daines.
Secretary Wright, it's great to have you back here. Last week, the EPA announced they've started the process to roll back President Biden's anti-energy rules, including MATS and Clean Power Plan 2.0. The Biden administration specifically targeted Colstrip there in Montana with these rules with the express intention of closing it down for good. Mr. Secretary, as you know, this would have been devastating for Montana jobs, devastating for grid reliability and energy production in the region at a time when we need more energy. It is vital we continue to expand energy production, not shut it down or replace it. That means building more projects while ensuring coal plants like Colstrip continue to produce baseload power, reliable, affordable power. My question, Secretary Wright, is as EPA and other agencies work to rescind and rewrite rules, will you weigh in to ensure that grid reliability, energy affordability, and baseload power are top of mind for rules that are affecting power generation?
Absolutely, yes, Senator. I'm passionate about that. In fact, I've testified in Congress multiple times before I got my new job on just that issue, that when regulations pursue a narrow agenda and they don't consider the broader impacts of what they're doing, they can be destructive on our country and on our people. And yeah, I'm very passionate about those topics.
Secretary Wright, thank you. And I will tell you, thank you. We truly have a subject matter expert on energy in yourself and your experience as a scientist, as a leader, and somebody who's not an ideologue, who's very pragmatic in trying to solve these important challenges facing our country as it relates to energy and the constraints we face today. Last week, Senator Hoeven and I, along with our colleagues from Montana and North Dakota delegations, sent you a letter expressing our strong support for DOE's efforts to advance American energy dominance, particularly through the approval of the North Plains Connector Interregional Transmission Project. As you know, the department's GRIP program awarded a $700 million grant to the Montana Department of Commerce for this critical project. When completed, this North Plains Connector would extend a 420-mile high-voltage transmission line capable of carrying up to 525 kilovolts of electricity between eastern Montana and western North Dakota. Right now, Montana exports the majority of its electricity, including from Colstrip. We go west to states like Oregon and Washington. This project would have the potential to diversify Montana's generation assets, unlocking billions in private investment and enhance our nation's energy security by connecting eastern and western electric grids. My question, Secretary Wright, to keep this critical project on track to meet its 2032 operational target, will you commit to supporting advancement of the North Plains Connector GRIP Award to ensure that we can move this forward?
So, Senator, thanks for that impassioned layout of that project. I'm quite familiar with the project. I've met with the developers of the project as well. Of course, it's very, very logical, connecting two separate grids together to allow flows back and forth. It's a very encouraging project. We are committed to following this project review process where a crew of people evaluate, not political, not biased for this or that. Just look at the math, look at the numbers, and is this thing viable and beneficial for America? Yes, no, or it's adjustable, it's modifiable. So we haven't finished that on that project yet, but I think you make a strong case for the project, and interconnections between grids is certainly something the United States needs more of.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. My last questions and points here regarding the small refinery exemption. Last week, the EPA released their renewable fuel obligations, which will put significant pressure on Montana's small refineries. Unfortunately, the Biden administration never issued small refinery exemptions, and the refineries in Montana suffered. DOE plays an important role in consulting with EPA over small refinery exemptions, and it's important that your voice is heard as EPA makes their decisions. Secretary Wright, I'd ask if your willingness to work with Administrator Zeldin to ensure that our Montana refineries with a small refinery exemption have the resources they need to continue operating.
Yes, indeed, Senator. I said earlier, I think the government involvement in energy has a bad historical track record. You raise another example where, maybe sounded like a reasonable idea became a blunt tool that says thou must do this. There's all different refineries and all different settings and all different access to feedstocks, and it's that rule is not well suited to the problem you've got. And there are ways to address the problem. And as you just said, the last administration chose not to address those problems. But yeah, I think this administration is very practical and wants to look at what trade-off package makes the most sense. So I hear you, and yes, I am engaged and will continue to be engaged with EPA on this dialogue.
Secretary Wright, thank you.
Thank you for raising it.
Mm-hmm.
Recognize the senator from Montana.
Mr. President, I want to thank my colleague, Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith of Mississippi, who also chairs the pro-life caucus in the U.S. Senate. I want to thank her for organizing this event today because we just passed the 3-year anniversary of the overturn of Roe versus Wade. That was on June 24th, 2022. That decision was a pivotal moment in our nation's history. Roe v. Wade was the worst Supreme Court decision, I would argue, since Plessy versus Ferguson, and resulted in the tragic deaths of millions of innocent lives. Countless numbers of precious unborn lives have been saved. In fact, since Roe's overturn, just in these 3 years, 13 states have implemented laws to protect life starting at conception. 19 states total have enacted pro-life laws. And earlier today, the Supreme Court delivered yet another pro-life victory in the Medina versus Planned Parenthood decision. The court affirmed that states have the right to decide how Medicaid dollars are spent, and that no one can force a state to fund the abortion industry. For too long, abortion providers like Planned Parenthood have used federal health care dollars as a backdoor to sustain their operations. And this ruling puts an end to that abuse and upholds the fact that taxpayers should never be compelled to subsidize big abortion. Cindy and I are the parents of 4. We're now the grandparents of 7. And I've always believed that protecting the unborn is one of our most important duties. It's a belief that I carry with me each day to this job in the U.S. Senate. In fact, that's why back in 2018, I founded the Pro-Life Caucus for the U.S. Senate. I had no idea at that point, this was pre-Dobbs, how important our work would become. And I'm grateful to the state of Mississippi, to Senator Hyde-Smith's home state, where the Dobbs decision came from. It was the courage of those folks in Mississippi that resulted in that case getting before the Supreme Court that had a profound impact across our nations with this Supreme Court ruling just a little over 3 years ago. During my time as chairman of the Pro-Life Caucus, we confirmed pro-life justices of the Supreme Court, including Justice Amy Coney Barrett, who went on to serve as that critical 5th vote to overturn Roe v. Wade. I remember that day very well when that news came down. I was struck by a truth that's found in the Old Testament. It's in the book of Jeremiah, chapter 1, verse 5. This is a great mystery, a mystery of God, where it says, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you, and before you were even born, I set you apart."
What a great truth, how God knows us, He loves us, and a reminder that all life, all lives are made in the image of God. And that's why there's dignity and there's value in every single life. And that includes the unborn, includes the disabled, the aging. All lives are worthy. I'm glad to see our country has made great strides in defending the defenseless. When we had our 4 children, I remember going through those appointments, those doctor appointments with Cindy and seeing those amazing images, seeing ultrasounds, but that was 20, 25, even 30 plus years ago. Today we get to relive that again with our grandchildren, and now our children when they're having their babies. And the technology is so remarkable. It's amazing to get an insight in what's going on in the womb. And, for those who don't believe in creation, don't believe that we were created, sometimes you just got to go back and see the miracle of life that's occurring as that little baby's being formed in the mom's womb. But today, the chemical abortion pill is the most widespread form of abortion. In fact, in 2023, it accounted for 63% of all abortions, and that number continues to rise. President Joe Biden and his administration removed safety precautions on taking mifepristone, including the in-person dispensing requirement and follow-up visit with a medical provider. And thanks to the Biden administration, the pills can even be shipped out by mail despite concrete evidence showing they're extremely harmful to women. In fact, the FDA and the pro-abortion advocates market the pill as, quote, safe as Tylenol. But here are the facts. There was just a recently published analysis of health insurance claims of over 865,000 women across the United States. They found that 1 in 10 women experience serious adverse effects, many of these resulting in emergency room visits. Now, let me share a stat here that's going to be shocking. And the data here is irrefutable, and we invite anybody to come check this data out. Here was the conclusion. The adverse health effects for women in this most recent study was 22 times higher than what's on the FDA's label on the abortion pills. Clearly, in no way is that abortion pill safe. And the FDA should reevaluate appropriate protections surrounding its use. I'm confident that with President Trump's leadership, with our Republican majority in the U.S. Senate, we're going to make some progress here. Already, President Trump has supported the pro-life movement. One of his first actions after taking office was to pardon 23 peaceful pro-life protesters who were unjustly incarcerated by Joe Biden's Justice Department. And in the U.S. Senate, I was proud to join my colleagues this Congress to introduce the Unborn Child Support Act, which will allow pregnant women to receive child support payments. Caring for a child starts long before birth. Any pregnant mom, any mom who understands what that process is like knows that caring for a child starts long before birth. And by supporting expectant mothers, we recognize the humanity of the unborn child and make sure that women have access to the resources they need to choose life. I'll fight to get this bill across the finish line. You know, it takes courage to stand for life in this day and age. I'd like to take a moment to thank all who have played a role in advancing the movement, from many of my fellow senators here to advocacy groups, to the grassroots advocates back in our home states, and to those who offer us prayers at night. Everybody plays a part. And I'm confident that one day, by the grace of God and the actions of this body, abortion will be unthinkable. where every preborn child will be protected by law. You know, I spend a lot of time with students who come from our states. We all know that. We see the kids when they come, they tour us. We'll have junior high kids, sometimes grade school, high school students, come from small towns, medium towns, large towns from our states. So these Montanans that come into our office, and I always like holding a meeting. I bring them into my office, and we sit down. Sometimes not enough chairs. Some students will be standing up. And I love just taking questions from the students. And invariably, there'll be a student that will raise their hand and ask me a question about my stance as it relates to a woman's right to choose or abortion. And rather than be a dad in that moment, and I've been a dad in a lot of moments raising our 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls, I think sometimes it's best for us to collectively kind of give some thought to how do you answer that question. So what I ask them is, how many of you have a smartphone? And most every one of those students has a phone. I said, let's just do a thought experiment here. Go to Google and type in 15-week baby, 15-week baby. And then touch on the images link on top. And let's talk about what we see there. And of course, the students, there's not a lot more said at that point. It's silent. I've done this many, many, many times because I just ask a basic question. Let's just have a debate. Is that life or not? If we were NASA scientists and the Mars rover lands on Mars and that image was projected back to a group of PhD scientists and literally rocket scientists, would they conclude that's life or not? And I've done this many, many, many times, and I will tell you, it's just silence as we all reflect on that basic question. Now, why did I pick a 15-week baby in the womb? It's because that was the line of demarcation that Mississippi had in their Dobbs case that defined, Mississippi said that's where life begins. That's where the protections begin. And it was that basis, that case went before the United States Supreme Court. It was what a 15-week baby looks like, and I think all of us should reflect on that. No matter where we are politically, where we are in terms of advocacy, just take a look at those images and reflect and ask yourself, is that a baby or not? And I think the images and the technology today with the clarity of ultrasounds is a pretty convincing argument. So this week, as we celebrate this historic anniversary of the Dobbs decision, let's reflect with grateful hearts on the progress we've made. Let's look forward with hope to a future where every life, whether born or unborn, is valued.
Senator Daines.
Mr. Walz, thank you for being here today, and thank you for your very distinguished service to our great nation and Special Forces. I very much enjoyed our conversation yesterday, and thank you for accepting going through this process to play a very important role here at the United Nations. Mr. Walz, as you know, the United Nations has become a hotbed of anti-Semitism, a hotbed of anti-Israeli sentiment. UN employees participated in the October 7th attacks, and Israeli hostages were held at UN facilities for months. The UN recently reappointed Francesca Albanese despite her repeatedly stated support for Palestinian resistance and regurgitation of anti-Israel blood libel. My question, Mr. Walz, is you clearly have your work cut out for you at the UN. Can you tell us more about how you plan to counter the anti-Semitic influence of UN officials like Ms. Albanese?
Well, thank you, Senator, and I always enjoy our engagement as well, and your advocacy for the America First agenda. I mean, just to add a couple points to your list and then to answer your question, you know, it's notable that the military leader of Hamas, Mohammed Sinwar, had an UNRWA badge on him in the tunnels of Gaza. There's indications at the World Health Organization and its hospitals. They knew that tunnels were being built underneath and knew that these hospitals were being used. And I have some of our veterans with you, have literally been shot at by terrorists hiding behind women and hiding behind children, and for Hamas to literally line the walls of its hideouts with hostages to protect its leadership is atrocious, and it should be called out at every turn. Yet, we just had to veto a resolution in the Security Council that went after Israel in what is absolutely a horrific war, and didn't even mention Hamas. And certainly didn't mention the fact that its leaders deliberately sacrifice, as a matter of strategy and tactics, deliberately sacrifice their own people in order to turn world opinion against Israel. So I think probably the easiest way to answer your question is sunlight is often the best disinfectant, and to continue to spotlight it and use not only the platform that is this position, but I think one of the best communicators in the world, which is President Trump, Secretary Rubio, and the leadership in this administration to continue to call it out.
Mr. Walls, thank you, and I'm grateful that you have moral clarity on this important issue. And certainly, as somebody who, like yourself, you have served in special operations. These are not theoretical exercises for you. You've seen the conflict between good and between evil. We talked a bit about Central Asia yesterday, Mr. Walls. It's a vitally important region, rich in natural resources. As you mentioned, you've spent some time over there in your prior career. Much of those resources are untapped, and the region could be a valuable new partner for energy exports to Europe. The UN, unfortunately, has pushed Central Asian countries to only adopt really a radical green agenda instead of more a balanced approach of all the above energy. And these radical green development goals could hinder the growth and success of developing countries like we see in Central Asia. Mr. Walls, how can you, as UN ambassador, ensure that Central Asia is encouraged to take advantage of its vast and considerable energy resources to foster a more sustainable and a prosperous future?
Yeah, thank you, and I appreciated the conversation and always learn a lot from them. One of the things that I admire about how President Trump approaches diplomacy, we saw it in his first Middle East trip, is what I call commercial diplomacy. The thing that binds people together often is business. It transcends dogma. It transcends ancient ideologies. You're seeing that in the Abraham Accords. When people are talking about data centers and rail and roads, they're not talking about thousand-year-old hatreds. In Central Asia in particular, I mean, going back to the old TAPI pipeline, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, one could only imagine if that had been in place. And now everyone has a common economic interest rather than fighting each other. I think we have real opportunities with Turkmenistan for the first time in a long time for their gas to head westward rather than eastward. We talked about the C5 grouping. We talk about Azerbaijan and their desire to not only come closer to the United States, but to perhaps put a real agreement in place with the Armenians, a real agreement in place with the Israelis, the commercial opportunities that abound for not only for American business, but that will change the geopolitical landscape. And I look forward to working with you and those groupings within the UN along those lines under the President Secretary's leadership.
Mr. Walls, thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Daines.
Thanks, Chairman McCormick. A few weeks ago, I made a swing through the Caucasus. This is a question for Ambassador Shapiro. I had the privilege to meet with President Aliyev. We had a very productive conversation. I think one of the undertold stories of what's happening certainly in that region of the world is what they've done to support Israel in terms of energy resources. I also had a chance to meet with the Israeli ambassador to Azerbaijan, Ambassador George Deek. It was a unique opportunity to explore the long-standing diplomatic ties between Azerbaijan and Israel, a relationship that only looks to grow stronger with the announcement of the SOCAR oil deal, which I think is going to help diversify the Israeli energy opportunities. Ambassador Shapiro, do you believe that Azerbaijan's relationship with Israel, which I think is an undertold story, might stand as an opportunity for other Islamic nations to expand diplomatic ties and work to normalize relations?
Thank you, Senator. I do. I think this relationship, as you said, is sort of underappreciated. Sometimes people would say, how can we expand the Abraham Accords? Maybe Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan has had diplomatic relations with Israel for many years, but it's one of the leading Muslim countries that has done that long before the Abraham Accords came on the scene. And because of their proximity to the region and even to the threats Israel faces from Iran, they've been a security partner. Because of their energy resources, they're an energy partner. Because of their Muslim population, they have
and I might add with that is it's the only country in the world that borders Russia and Iran.
So
very strategic.
Their strategic importance is really impossible to deny, but they also have that sort of cultural convening capability and able to build bridges to strengthen Israel's relations with other Arab and Muslim countries, including some in South Asia or Central Asia, which already have relations, but not as deep and as rich as Azerbaijan's. But as we've thought about ways of broadening those regional convenings to really have the sense of an European Union or an ASEAN-style organization or gathering of countries in the Middle East, Azerbaijan most certainly should take part in something like that.
I think Brzezinski described Central Asia as the wine bottle and Azerbaijan as the cork. Becomes a very important part of that east-west type corridor that you want to see happen here with Central Asia embracing, moving more in this direction when you think about who they're surrounded by and their neighbors to the north and to the east. Mr. Shapiro, in your testimony, you also laid out several things that have changed over the last 7 to 10 years regarding Iran's nuclear production and weapons delivery capabilities. I'd argue that Iran's intent is and has always been, regarding the nuclear capabilities, to create a nuclear weapon. If they were trying to create peaceful nuclear operations, why are they doing it way underground, why it took the B-2s to destroy that versus something on the surface? So I think we've settled that question. I think under the Obama administration, we had a big fight up here on Capitol Hill. What's Iran's intent? And I think we've been vindicated in terms of it was to build a nuclear warhead. Looking at their current capabilities, behavior, and rhetoric, do you believe that the U.S. should be concerned about their space program? Just in the last 24 hours, there have been news reports about the Iranians launching a rocket here for their satellite program. They're saying it's for peaceful purposes. As somebody who's from a state that's a third of our ICBMs, I think differently perhaps around the importance of space is to deliver an ICBM. Do you think their space program is a means for perfecting an intercontinental weapons system?
Senator, I'm not expert in the technology, but I do understand that there's not a huge difference between a space launch vehicle and an ICBM. And if you're able to master one technology, it's quite applicable to the other. What we clearly know about Iran, and of course we knew this in 2015 when the JCPOA was signed, and we knew it in 2018 when the U.S. withdrew from the JCPOA, is that Iran has unbridled hostility. They express it openly. It's their ideology. It's the kind of organizing principle of the regime toward Israel, which they've called for its destruction, toward the United States. They have, of course, pursued a nuclear weapons program. We understand that, but also a ballistic missile program. And we even saw the danger that program in its current state can cause in the destruction that Israel endured.
Which I think is part of the undertold story as well. Israel having to take preemptive action here was around those ballistic missiles, even absence of a nuclear warhead.
And they were on a
overwhelm the systems, the defense of Israel.
Exactly. They were on a path to produce 3,000 a year. Really couldn't have been sustained. And so the same risk with an ICBM.
Thank you. Mr. Hook, I want to give you a chance to maybe to weigh in on this as well.
Yeah, the Iranian regime has been using its space program as a cover for its ICBM program for 10, 15 years or longer. And so I remember when I was working on the UN Security Council, passing resolutions condemning Iran's use of its space program for these purposes, to develop an ICBM capability so they can threaten the United States.
Thank you. I'm out of time, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
There's a lot more to talk about here. So
there sure is.
Mr. President.
The senator from Montana.
Mr. President, today the Senate will vote to proceed to my joint resolution to congressionally disapprove
and officially roll back President Biden's anti-coal rule in Montana. HJ Res 104 is supported by the entire Montana delegation. And I want to thank Congressman Downing and Congressman Zinke for leading this resolution in the House, and for Senator Sheehy for joining me in the Senate. And this resolution is supported by many Montanans, starting with the governor of Montana, Governor Greg Gianforte, the mayor of Colstrip, Montana, the Montana Coal Council, the Montana Electric Co-ops, Northwestern Energy, local counties, both of the affected coal mines, and many, many more, and I will tell you, many, many more coal miners. I want to explain quickly what we are doing here today. Today we will take the first step in overturning the Miles City Resource Management Plan amendment that prohibits any new coal leasing in eastern Montana. Let me be very clear. This resolution only overturns the anti-coal amendment that was issued by the Biden administration after the last election in the final days of their term. None of the actions taken today affect the underlying Miles City Resource Management Plan or how the BLM manages recreation, conservation, and other energy developments in the state. Future coal development will be managed under the existing resource management plan as it had for years before Biden slipped in at the last hour this amendment. Now, why is this important to Montana? The Biden amendment prohibits all new coal leasing across all of eastern Montana. Eastern Montana and Wyoming are home to the Powder River Basin. These are the largest coal reserves in the United States. Many who are watching, when you think about Montana, you think about our amazing fly fishing streams, our national parks, our beautiful mountains, our wilderness areas, the tremendous hunting and hiking opportunities we provide. But many don't know that Montana has more recoverable coal than any state in the United States. And think about this, the Biden administration prohibited new coal development in America's largest coal reserve. BLM's resource management plans are meant to be a bipartisan process, taking in feedback from people on the ground and implementing the multiple use mission of the BLM. But sadly, the Biden administration tried to pull a fast one. They took this process, flipped it on its face, and they disregarded the voices of Montana. Well, I can tell you here this afternoon, the voices of Montana are speaking loudly with a united Montana delegation both here in Washington as well as Montanans back home in the state, and we are going to right that wrong today. We're going to give Montana a voice in the process. Overturning this partisan rule will grow Montana energy jobs and help our rural communities. In fact, according to the Montana Coal Council, coal supports nearly 900 high-paying jobs in Montana and has provided $2.7 billion in federal, state, private, and tribal royalties. And in a letter from Montana's Governor, Greg Gianforte, he states this Biden rule amounts to a loss of $4.3 billion in future revenue to the state trust land beneficiaries, which includes K through 12 public education. This is a monumental moment for the state of Montana. I'm thrilled This is being considered today on the floor of the United States Senate, and I urge my colleagues to support Montana jobs, Montana communities, reliable and low-cost energy, and to vote yes on today's motion.